Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the defunding the police theory. Another question here is, what is the personality profile of law enforcement officers? So starting with the idea of defunding the police, and then I'll move to the discussion of personality. There has been a lot of concern about the behavior of police officers and the culture of police departments for some time. Racism is one of those concerns, but there have been many other concerns as well, including corruption, poor job performance, deceptive behavior, and a lack of accountability. One suggestion that has come out of these concerns is to reduce or to eliminate the funding for police departments. I will look at these two strategies separately. Let's start with the idea of reducing the funding. The idea with reduction of funding would be that money would be diverted to increase the availability of mental health treatment and other social programs that strengthen the community. This essentially would limit the role of police officers and put mental health counselors with police officers. The idea here is to inject more thoughtfulness and humanity into the interactions between law enforcement and citizens. This is already being done in some places, and there seems to be some level of success with this idea. Another idea is having more crisis response teams available, so a police officer gets into a situation where they feel a mental health factor may be at play, and they can call for help from crisis. Now looking at the elimination of funding. With this plan, mental health counselors, social workers, and other professionals would completely replace the police. The difficulty here is that people are still going to demand justice. So if a crime occurs, the criminal would not be arrested, and the citizens would take matters into their own hands. The kind of justice that would be pursued might not be in alignment with the law. For example, citizens would be unlikely to read a suspect their Miranda rights and then transport them to jail. I think a faster mode of justice would be much more likely. I just don't see how this defunding the police idea can actually be successful in meeting the larger goals of equality and justice. It would mean eliminating one potential source of problems, law enforcement, in exchange for a guaranteed increase in another problem, lawlessness. In the end, if one wants to conceptualize law enforcement as evil, then keeping them would be the lesser of two evils. In my experience, a number of police officers actually do feel this way about their own profession. They feel that society views them as the lesser of two evils. It's kind of a sad way to look at one's career choice. It doesn't make it seem very appealing in terms of recruiting. Join the police force and be the lesser of two evils. I think that the job of police officer used to have some level of respect. People wanted to be police, and now we're seeing that a lot of individuals do not want that job. So there has definitely been an image problem in that particular profession. Another problem with the defunding the police idea would be that criminals would migrate to areas without police. So places that decide to keep the police would become incredibly safe, and those that decided to defund the police would become extremely dangerous. I think this would attract all kinds of criminals, including serial killers. This would be a tough sell for certain places. If one were to imagine some place that depends on tourist revenue, say Las Vegas, if they decided to defund the police, their slogan could be Las Vegas, now with more serial killers. It just doesn't have an appealing ring to it. So if defunding the police would lead to mayhem, what should be done? To appreciate the best course of action in this situation, I think one needs to start with identifying what is wrong currently. What is the problem with law enforcement? Why didn't it work out the way that people hoped? When trying to answer these questions, first of all, it is important to note that many police officers do a good job. And I think some police departments do a good job as well. So here we're really talking about tendencies, not something that applies to every person or every department. So backing up and gaining a wider view of the problem, I think it's really the police culture. It's harmful for a variety of reasons. I'll talk about a few of those factors here. When somebody becomes a police officer, they join a group that has a difficult task, to enforce the law fairly. This message of fairness quickly degrades into good guys versus bad guys. Police departments are essentially relocation services. They relocate bad guys to prison. All people are then divided up into law-abiding citizens and criminals. Everybody is either good or bad. So the job of the police really comes down to identification. Locate the bad guys. Those bad guys are loose in the community, and it's their job to find them. It's a dangerously simplistic way to view the world, but when police departments try to appreciate the nuances of social interaction, they get accused of enforcing the law in an uneven way. Why did I get a ticket when that guy over there didn't get a ticket? So then the burden moves to the courts to be fair. Under this theory, the police arrest everybody who they believe broke the law, and the courts can figure out whether the person should be punished or not, like the idea behind a jury of one's peers. So justice will come at that point. The problem with this theory is that law enforcement and the courts work in unison. They're not truly separate and distinct. One can only be convicted of a crime if one was arrested. The default position of the court is that police officers tell the truth. If a police officer believes a crime has been committed, even if that determination is made without the application of logic or reason, the court is clearly biased toward that finding. Therefore, no matter how much energy we put into making the courts fair, it really does come down to police officers. They are put in a challenging position. The next factor, the next problem with the police culture, police officers depend on people in their department to be on their side, to keep them safe. When someone becomes a police officer, they are a member of that community. Police have been known to lie to protect each other. It's actually the expectation. Lying is easy to do for two reasons. One is that sense of community, and the other is the sense that the end justifies the means. It's okay to frame a person if you know they're guilty. It's okay to protect your friend who's a police officer when you know they are innocent. It's a dangerous way of thinking. The problem is that the police start to believe that they are on a team and not there to serve the community. The next factor is the job itself. The personality that is required to do so many things, to fulfill so many roles, is actually impossible to achieve. There is no ideal personality profile to be a police officer because the job demands both high and low scores across 3 of the 5 personality traits. I will explain this and I'll talk about the personality profile of the police. Again, this is around tendency, so any particular police officer could have a much different profile. Interestingly, research suggests that there is no archetypal personality profile for police officers. As a population, they are heterogeneous. We see a wide range of personality trait scores. So looking at the demands in terms of personality and the personality profile, I will be using the 5-factor model of personality theory. I remember the 5 factors through the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So starting with openness to experience, this is one of those traits that requires both high and low scores. Police officers need to be low in openness in the sense that they need to rigidly understand right from wrong. Laws don't have shades of gray. They need to be high in openness in order to investigate crimes. They need to be intellectually curious. They also need to be able to feel emotions somewhat intensely in order to facilitate the understanding of other people's feelings. And they need to have some degree of imagination, because criminals can be creative. What is the actual tendency for police? Police officers tend to score low in openness to experience. They don't tend to tolerate ambiguity very well. Now moving to conscientiousness, this is one where the direction is actually fairly clear. High conscientiousness is demanded to be orderly, competent, have a sense of duty, be deliberate, have self-discipline, and be productive. Police officers tend to have mid-range conscientiousness. Now moving to extroversion, this one we see high and low demands. The demands of the job require high extroversion, so a police officer can be assertive, friendly, and active. The job also demands low extroversion, so the police officer can be analytical, not be driven by excitement seeking, and remain distant enough from people to see circumstances objectively. Police actually tend to be high in extroversion, although it's mostly related to assertiveness and excitement seeking. We don't see a marked tendency to be friendly and outgoing in that population. I would actually say from my experience that excitement seeking is the most obvious facet of extroversion that many police endorse. It's actually a key part of the police personality. For example, many police officers want to work on the night shift because of the increased probability of conflict. And there are many police officers who volunteer for high-risk duties, like being on a SWAT team. Now moving to agreeableness, here we see another split. The job demands high agreeableness in the sense that police officers must be straightforward, helpful, empathic, and altruistic. The job also demands low agreeableness, as police are instructed to be deceptive in order to trick suspects into confessing, and they have to be willing to distrust people, to be suspicious of people's motives. Police tend to have low agreeableness, especially in trust, straightforwardness, and tender-mindedness, which is a lot like empathy. Now moving to the last trait, neuroticism. This one is clear in one direction. The job demands that police are low in neuroticism. They can't be quick to anger, they can't be prone to depression and anxiety, they can't be impulsive, and they can't be vulnerable to stress. In reality, police do tend to be low in neuroticism. The facet of vulnerability really stands out here. So we see that they're fairly resistant to stressors. So we can see that the job of police officer really demands a personality profile that cannot exist. And the personality profile that is common for police officers is consistent with subclinical psychopathy. Now, some people might hear the word psychopathy and say, oh, if they're psychopathic, that must mean they're bad. Psychopathy isn't actually good or bad. It's just a combination of personality traits. And it's a necessary combination to do certain jobs. Surgeons, for example, tend to have subclinical psychopathy. When psychopathy becomes clinical, when we see extreme scores, then we do see a number of problems related to criminality. So with all this in mind, I have 5 ideas I think could be helpful. They don't address every facet of the problem, but I think they could be useful in some ways. The first idea, civilian oversight. The leadership of police departments for tactical purposes should be senior law enforcement officers, but for everything else it really needs to be only civilians. Many police departments have resisted this, and that really worries me. Civilian oversight is critical and makes sense considering the police are serving civilians. Another area related to this would be transparency. This has been a massive problem. I think body cameras should be mandatory in every situation, and building on this, without video evidence, a police officer's word should not automatically be considered to be the truth. Right? I'd like to see other types of evidence, like concrete evidence. Videos, I think, really work the best. Second item, it should be easier to prosecute police officers who commit crimes. Good police officers actually want this. Good police officers are offended by how many of their fellow police officers regularly commit crimes. Item number 3, diversity. Now, when I use this word, I do mean every type of diversity, including racial and gender diversity, as well as other types. But here I'm really emphasizing specifically personality diversity. We see some personality diversity, like I talked about, but I think we need to see more police officers with high openness to experience, high conscientiousness, and we need to see a bit more agreeableness. Item number 4, police officers should be paired with professionals like mental health counselors. I talked about that before. And number 5, we need to find a way to reduce substance use. It's really out of control, especially alcohol. I think it's caused not only by the stress of the job, but also a fear of appearing weak. In theory, the police officer is given a choice between seeking mental health counseling and using substances. But the culture of the police department doesn't really give them a choice. Police officers have to be allowed to be human beings. There has to be a way for them to get help, to feel better, to reduce symptoms, and to return to work. It can't be a situation where if they start having mental health problems, they are really forced to hide those problems. I think this just creates a pressure cooker effect, right? We have police officers out there who have unaddressed mental health symptoms. That starts to affect every area of their work. It affects their relationships. Their job performance decreases. That puts more stress on them as they start to get scrutinized. And it just is a recipe for a disaster. It's a recipe for them to make a catastrophic error in judgment. We need to intercept these problems early, get police officers the help they need, and get way in front of these problematic behaviors. So those are my thoughts on the defunding the police issue and the personality profile of police officers. If you like this content, please subscribe to my channel and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to my Patreon in the description for this video. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.